We're going to get started. My name is James Pronio. I'm from the World Wildlife Fund, one of the resource partners for the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, and I am really excited to be your host for today's discussion. As people continue to trickle in, I want to take a moment to remind everyone that we are recording this session and we'll be making it available publicly. During this webinar, everyone's microphones will be muted and their videos will be turned off. However, we do encourage you all to ask questions in the Zoom chat box. Your submission is anonymous and no one in the audience will be able to see your question, so don't worry about what other people might think. We'll have time to answer as many questions as we can today, and any that we're not able to get to, we'll be sure to follow up on afterwards. And of course, we welcome any additional questions or feedback that you have after the webinar has concluded. Please send those to me at james.pronio@wwfus.org. We'll put that email in the chat box now. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome to the Power of Private Sector Leadership, Cutting Food Waste in Half by 2030. This event is being co-hosted by the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and the Environmental Defense Fund, and we are proud to be featuring this work during Climate Week NYC. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, or PCFwc, as you'll hear us refer to today, is a public-private partnership featuring some of the nation's largest food businesses alongside local, state, and provincial governments, all working collaboratively toward a shared ambition of effective, industry-wide actions that prevent and reduce wasted food along the West Coast, and provides a critical opportunity for the Pacific Coast region to lead the country in addressing the environmental, food security, and climate change crisis of food waste. The centerpiece of PCFwc is a voluntary agreement that builds upon existing food waste reduction platforms and commitments, including UN SDG 12.3 and Champions 2030, and aligns with and informs similar initiatives from around the world. The PCFwc is a project of the Pacific Coast Collaborative, a regional collaboration network featuring the US states of California, Oregon, Washington, plus British Columbia and Canada, as well as the cities of Los Angeles, Oakland, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, and Vancouver, all of them working together across geographic borders and vertically among city, state, and provincial governments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through a range of initiatives, while also growing the regional economy, which collectively represents the world's 5th largest. And co-hosting with us today is the Environmental Defense Fund, one of the world's leading international nonprofit organizations, which is working in 28 countries across the globe to create transformational solutions to the most serious environmental problems. And we're excited to announce EDF's newest effort with PCFwc resource partner ReFed, the EDF Climate Corps Food Waste Fellowship. Starting in 2022, a limited number of companies will have the chance to host a Climate Corps Fellow supported by both EDF and ReFed to help design and execute food waste reduction strategies. Host company applications are now being accepted. If you're interested in learning more about how your company can participate, we're putting an email address in the chat box for you now. So today we're going to be talking about food waste and specifically the important role that the private sector plays in reducing it and what public entities can do to help support them. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 calls for a 50% reduction in food waste by the year 2030. Businesses, governments, funders, and others are already making efforts to address this challenge, but a massive acceleration is needed to achieve that goal in the next 8 years. Here in the US, 35% of all food goes unsold or uneaten, and the majority of that amount ends up going to waste in destinations like incineration, down the drain, or the landfill. It's just never harvested and left in the field. Surplus food in the US is valued at about $408 billion each year, or 2% of US GDP. And this happens across the entire food system. This chart shows an extent of surplus food in each sector. A lot happens at the household level, and making sure consumers have proper food management skills is really important. But more than 60% of loss of waste happens before it reaches the consumer. And you can see the environmental impacts. It's responsible for 4% of all US greenhouse gas emissions. It consumes 14% of all freshwater, 18% of all cropland, and it's the #1 product entering landfills. And all this is happening while people are going hungry. Here in the US, 1 in 8 people are food insecure, according to Feeding America, while a new USDA report says 1 in 10. And while food insecurity is a complicated topic caused by a number of factors, people aren't going hungry because there's not enough food being produced to feed everyone. It's just not getting to the people who need it. So clearly, reducing food waste is important for the environment, for those who are facing food insecurity, and for the economy. And the private sector sits at the center of these reduction efforts. I'd like to introduce Teresa Eberhardt from our co-host, the Environmental Defense Fund. She's going to talk about the role of the private sector in food waste reduction, as well as other efforts to address environmental challenges like climate change.
Hi, thank you. I'm Teresa Eberhardt, a project manager at EDF Plus Business Resilient Food and Forest team. And we're the team within EDF that works with corporate partners in the food and agriculture space. Environmental Defense Fund has been working with the private sector for nearly 30 years to catalyze climate and environmental leadership and collaboration across companies and supply chains. And in addition to that, we work to transform business as usual in companies' products, operations, and advocacy. And when we first got started, the main levers to influence a company's behavior were through its supply chain and purchasing power. But today, as many of you will know, there are more pressure points than ever on businesses, including investors, companies, and customers holding companies accountable. And businesses are increasingly setting goals that go beyond their operational footprint and encompass their value chains. And so we do see more and more companies making net zero commitments or other goals around Scope 3 emissions. But despite this progress, most companies are still struggling to get started and to deliver the near-term actions they need to meet their aspirational goals. And this work can be hard, especially when you're trying to tackle your Scope 3 emissions, which are your upstream and downstream activities like agriculture production and food waste. And this is where my team at EDF and the other organizations on this call can come in. We partner directly with food and agriculture companies to turn climate commitments into tangible progress. And like I said, for most companies, but especially if you are a food company, your largest footprint will be in Scope 3 emissions. And food waste is an important part of those because of the methane production from food. But luckily, as you will continue to hear on this call, we have solutions available today to address food waste. And given that nearly half of all expected planetary warming between now and 2050 will come from methane, it's crucial that we begin implementing and accelerating these types of solutions today. But no one company or organization can tackle this problem alone, which is why partnerships and collaborations are so critical in advancing sustainability goals. Through collaboration, companies can reduce risk, catalyze innovation, and create measurable business and environmental results. And that's one of the reasons why we are so excited about the new Climate Core Food Waste Fellowship. As you just heard, this is a cohort of summer fellows focused on designing and executing food waste reduction strategies that can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions and spur innovative solutions within companies to reduce food waste. Participating fellows will receive customized training from EDF and ReFed experts on the environmental and business impacts of food waste, as well as the rapidly emerging marketplace of solutions to ensure that they are well equipped to support participating host companies. So if you're a business that wants to address food waste, but just don't know where to start, or already have work in progress, but not sure what's next, a fellow is a great person who can come in and serve as a guide on your sustainability journey. We like to say at EDF that corporate sustainability leadership is not the company out front doing this alone. It's the company that's working in collaboration with others to change an entire industry. And on this call, you'll hear a few examples of companies, public-private partnerships, and collaborations doing just that. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, James.
Thanks, Teresa. That's great. So the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment was designed as a way to support food businesses along the North American West Coast in their efforts to cut food waste. Businesses who sign up to the PCFWC's voluntary agreement publicly commit to private sector action to help reduce food waste along the West Coast by 50% by 2030. Businesses who join are not required to reduce their own waste by this amount, only to contribute by the overall regional reduction. These are our current signatories. We have representatives from the retail and manufacturing sectors right now, and we're expanding our outreach to include other sectors, including growers, hospitality, hotels, and food service businesses. They're supported by resource partners with the expertise in food waste, project management, data measurement, and more. The PCFWC is a public-private partnership, and around the world, these important collaborations between the private sector and governments are helping to launch and scale programs to fight food waste. The PCFWC works with and receives generous financial support from the following regional jurisdictions to bolster the efforts of food businesses to cut waste from their operations. So how does all of this work? The PCFWC uses the Target Measure Act framework to identify food waste hotspots and take action to reduce them. All PCFWC signatories establish a baseline year for wasted food within their operations and report their progress against it annually. To help them do that, we offer sector-specific data collection tools that can help. Let's take a look. Signatories share their anonymized and aggregated data through a food waste calculator developed by ReFed. This calculator asks for data such as how much unsold food your company has by department if you're a grocer, or by facility if you're a manufacturer, as well as supplier rejections and food surplus and waste destinations by US state. That data is pushed through several background calculations before being populated in a separate waste tab, which is then uploaded to a Citrix secure server. And the really neat thing is that businesses' proprietary information stays on their PC, and only the populated waste tab is uploaded, so your data is even more secure. Importantly, the calculator also populates data that can be uploaded to the EPA Food Waste Challenge and WRI's Food Waste Atlas, and soon Project Gigaton. One thing I'll note, when you sign on to PCFWC, you're not adding another initiative to your list of responsibilities, and we also don't require a public commitment if you're already working with another initiative. We simply provide the reporting and pre-competitive collaboration platform for food waste reduction solutions. PCFWC signatories have the opportunity to participate in collaborative, pre-competitive working groups to discuss key waste hotspots within the value chain and to share strategies and best practices. Currently, we have a range of working groups meeting regularly to discuss challenges and opportunities with dairy and produce, as well as food recovery. We also offer a policy roundtable, which provides a forum and safe space for businesses to voice challenges and concerns with current and future policy directly to representatives from participating jurisdictions. Through these working groups and discussions, and the data submitted by signatories through the calculators, we can determine what sort of action we should take as a collaborative to move the needle forward. Once we've identified a problem to tackle, PCFWC then hires technical consultants to develop and launch pilot projects. This could range from testing AI technology for better order accuracy, or exploring the different ways e-commerce data could prevent food waste. These are examples of 2 projects we're currently working on. Or it could be a technical consultant diving into the supply chain to find the sources and quantities of waste for identified area like potatoes or strawberries or milk, and providing suggested solutions to address it. Finally, we share the outcomes and learnings from pilots among all PCFWC members and the wider food sector. And those food waste reduction learnings, as well as the cost savings that go along with it, aren't solely meant to be kept on the West Coast. The goal is for the entire supply chain across the whole country to benefit from what we do. So now I'm excited to introduce you to 3 of our signatories. Mark Kopang is a director of sustainability at Raley's, a family-owned supermarket chain headquartered in West Sacramento, California. Raley's is dedicated to nourishing people, communities, and the planet. And while they have already launched food waste reduction initiatives in their operations, they joined PCFWC to take those to the next level through direct collaborations with other leading grocery retailers, facilitated data collection, and support from the PCFWC's resource partners. And Natasha Toffel is a sustainability analyst at Sprouts. Sprouts is a supermarket chain headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and operating in 23 states, offering a wide selection of organic and natural foods. Sprouts has also established food waste reduction programs that help divert food waste going to other destinations like landfill, and also making sure they go to food relief agencies, animal feed, and compost. And from the manufacturing sector, we've got Julia Pearson. Julia is the sustainability manager at our most recent signatory, Bob's Red Mill. Bob's Red Mill is a 100% employee-owned stone grinding manufacturer of more than 400 whole grain and gluten-free products. And like our other guests, they've made a commitment to sustainability and are working on initiatives to support nutritious food and a healthy planet. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to fire off a couple questions to each of you. Just take a minute or so to give your response and your take on things from the PCFWC from your perspective. I think we'll start with Mark. Given that your company is already working and doing a lot when it comes to food waste, why did you decide to join PCFWC?
Well, James, thanks for the opportunity to talk about what we're doing. I think the real reason, or the main reason for us joining, was while we have I think a fairly mature and significant effort already in lines with dealing with food waste, we don't believe that we have all the answers. And I think kind of business can kind of operate in a silo, and a lot of times we do. And in that silo, we can think we're doing really well and not really know all the other things that we could be doing. So I think that the collaboration that we've been able to achieve with these pre-competitive discussions that we have been very helpful, and providing perspective on what we're doing well, and also looking at what we could do to improve.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I'll pose the same question to you, Natasha. You're up next.
In terms of why we decided to join PC?
Correct.
I would say that we decided to join really to help our food rescue and food waste diversion programs continue to evolve beyond what we may be, to Mark's point, beyond what we may be capable of doing on our own as operating in a silo. I think that, being a part of the policy group specifically has really helped us kind of think creatively and outside the box about how we can further our food waste diversion efforts. And that, pre-competitive advantage has really been invaluable to helping us to expand and evolve and even grow creatively some of our initiatives around food waste diversion.
Thanks, Natasha. And finally, Julia, now, why did you guys decide to join PCFWC?
Yeah, thanks, James, and thanks for all your good work. So here at Bob's Red Mill, our public commitment around reducing food waste, food loss from farm to fork, it's actually fairly new. We've always been guided by sustainability, but our official program is new. So we're dipping our toes in publicly, and this coalition allows us to get the guidance, the access to these expertise and resources, the measurement tools like the refed calculator that you touched on. That's just so valuable. It lets us analyze our current processes and look at what we aren't doing yet. I'm super excited about the upstream prevention, the synergies, and the manufacturing side on production efficiency, rather than just concentrating on solutions downstream, which I feel like sometimes dominates the conversation. And of course, this business to business collaboration is super valuable, like having access to Natasha and Mark that already have sophisticated, great programs going.
That's great. I'll follow up with our next question to you, Julia, since you're on screen. How is this helping your business achieve its sustainability goals?
Yeah, we're an employee-owned company, so it's so important to us that we create value and minimize waste for all of our employee owners. We're really led by that tenet, and we're exploring a lot of areas around food waste, from optimizing our shelf life to standardizing labeling, rescuing scrap, and then educating our eaters. So I feel like this coalition can help us in all of those areas. And we know that our food loss, it touches all areas of our value chain. So with all these stakeholders involved with coalition, including the policymakers at the table, it really is going to help us to effectively build strategies.
Thanks, Julia. Natasha, how is this helping Sprouts achieve its sustainability goals?
I think that's happening on multiple fronts. Not only are we getting, really important information around our actual through the data aggregation piece, we're getting really powerful insight into which categories of waste that we really need to improve upon in terms of diversion efforts. But then, just the roundtables that we conduct are really helping us to kind of think creatively on solutions on how we can take our already established program one step further. We have a goal to achieve zero waste by 2025. And, when you already have gone so far, you really have to get creative. And sometimes when your teams, especially in the realm of sustainability, are relatively small, it's nice to have this wide group of members that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and engage in conversation around how we can take it to the next level.
Awesome. And Mark, on Realty's side.
Yeah, we look at sustainability as good business. And I think looking at food waste and maximizing opportunities for both sell-through and then food donation, and then obviously the end use, which in our case is sending to a biodigester, all important steps. And the less we send to the biodigester, the better. For us, understanding kind of on a larger scale how we can really incorporate new practices, how we can engage with the regulatory agencies, and how we can engage with each other within the group to look at all those things. It really helped us, I think, raise the level of conversation within Raley's on our food rescue, our food basically waste reduction efforts. So I think it's been helpful to really make this a higher level discussion within our organization.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Mark. And I'm going to keep you on for our last round of questions. What has been the most important part of this to you so far as a member of PCFWC?
I think looking at the data that we have and getting that integrated with the refed calculator to really understand food waste from a different perspective. We had our own internal measurements, and I joked that we were basically putting a round or square peg in a round hole. There was certainly some challenges with that integration, but the process of going through the integration of our information with the refed calculator yielded some good results for us internally, as far as understanding how we can be more streamlined in our process, but also just having the knowledge that we are going to have a third party collaboration of our efforts, even if it's indirect, but have that level of kind of reporting through a different lens, I think is really going to be helpful to us in continuing our journey.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Mark. Natasha, what's the most important part for you so far from Sprouts?
The most important part for me is really the work that we're doing around policy and really trying to further policy initiatives across the board and having conversations around how we can extend the life of food longer. I think that's really probably one of the most impactful, aside from all the tools that PCC offers in terms of data collection, reporting out. I think those are invaluable, but really for me personally, it's just about the policy and really coming up with creative solutions to extend the life of food and get more food out to those who need it, and really kind of breaking through some of those barriers around labeling and such.
Great. And finally, Julia, last one on board. What's the most important part of this work to you so far as a member of PCFWC and our newest member?
Yeah, we're only 1 month in, so I'm really excited about beginning on the measurement. Both Mark and Natasha touched on that as being super valuable. So I'm ready to dig in there. It really goes hand in hand with what we're already guided on within operations around quality, lean manufacturing, avoiding waste. So I feel like it's not going to be extra work. It's going to help us be a better company. And we get the benefit of learning from leaders in this field, lessons learned, mistakes that have been made that now we don't have to. And just that data forward approach to building our programs is what I think is going to be very important for us as a member.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia, and thanks to Mark and to Natasha. Really appreciate you guys hanging on and providing a little feedback from your end and your perspective as signatories. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment is modeled after a similar program in the UK called the Courtauld Commitment, which found that on average, businesses experienced a 14-to-1 return on their investment when they implemented food waste reduction solutions. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ian Bowles from PCFWC Resource Partner WRAP for more information on the benefits for businesses who reduce food waste.
Good. Am I on there, James?
Good to have you here.
Oh, yes, good to see you. So, yeah, good morning, all. It's evening here. What time are we at? 6:30. I think it's about 11 o'clock where you are, but anyway, you've got your day ahead of you. So, good morning, all. My name's Ian Bowles, and I work for the UK Waste and Resources Action Programme. It's better known by the acronym WRAP. Just a little bit about us. So, we're a not-for-profit international NGO. So we've got a global presence now. We generate evidence-based solutions, so we're a research organisation. We run the Courtauld Agreement that James has just alluded to, similar to the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. It's called the Courtauld Commitment 2030. That enables collaborative action across the entire UK food chain to deliver farm-to-fork reductions in food loss and waste. We also focus on greenhouse gas emissions, water stress, both in the UK and internationally. We also are responsible for the UK Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, which was launched in September 2018. The UK's largest retailers, producers, manufacturers, and the HAF sector, hospitality and food service, have committed to the roadmap and to look to implement. Well, we've got a range of guidance and a toolkit, some templates that help businesses to target, to measure, and to act on food surplus and waste. We currently have 260 large UK food businesses as roadmap supporters, of which 210 have implemented a best practice target, measure, act approach in their UK operations to reduce food surplus and waste, and they provide their data, their food surplus and waste data, to WRAP on an annual basis. We're also working currently with all the major UK retailers on whole chain food waste reduction plan projects, adopting a farm to fork approach, as waste is an end-to-end problem, which requires collaborative action along entire value chains. So that's just a quick overview of who we are and what we do. James has asked that I share some of the work we've completed here, and I've got lots more that I can share with you. We've got 50 case studies in total. James, I'll just say some of that with you, specifically the work we've supported to help businesses to reduce food surplus and waste in their supply chains alongside delivering commercial benefits. So we worked with the UK retailer, the cooperative, on a project looking to drive resource efficiency and reduce waste in their potato supply chain. Potatoes are grown for the cooperative at various locations in England and Scotland, but both on cooperative owned and operated farms, but also on contract with other farms and farmers. To deliver this project, we adopted what we would call a lean and green approach, which enabled us to look strategically at resource use right across the whole chain. So value stream mapping was used to follow potatoes through all stages of the value chain, detailing levels of resource consumption, so not just waste, but also energy and water. We considered food waste occurring at each process point, so from harvesting through to storage, grading and packing, distribution, retail store, and looked at what additional action could be taken to reduce household waste through, for example, innovative packaging solutions, best practice product labelling, and improved on-pack storage advice. I mean, finding value in the full crop is always an overarching aim. Agronomy can maximise the return to growers by, for example, increasing the percentage of premium sizes of potatoes, such as bakers and baby new potatoes. However, not all of the crop will be in these size bands, and typically between 5 and 10% of harvested yield graded out before being packed and sent to low value markets such as animal feed. In this study, a detailed analysis of size distribution of whites, so Maris, Piper and King Edward varieties of potato in a typical crop showed the potential for reducing grade out losses by changing the screen sizes, so commonly used in grading. For example, changing from a 45mm to a 43mm screen increased whole crop utilisation for the King Edwards variety by more than 5%. So a much improved crop utilisation, meaning that more of the crop was sold as intended for human consumption and not sent for animal feed. So collaboration and joint planning with all supply chain partners was critical to achieving many of the efficiency savings identified through this project. Recognising that up to 3 years planning and production goes into producing each crop, and significant value can be lost, for example, when promotions or orders are changed in the short term. So that was another consideration that came out of this project. Reducing waste and improving efficiency through the promotional cycle was also identified as a particular opportunity. So our learning, and I think you've already talking to this, previous people have mentioned this, our learning is that it's absolutely essential that collaboration delivers value for all supply chain partners, and that end-to-end approach should always consider the end consumer. The UK produces 9.6 million tonnes of food waste annually, and that doesn't include on-farm, that's post-farm gate, of which 70% is generated as household waste. So unless we need to address that consumer waste number, or the UK will not deliver the SDG 12.3 target. So that's a quick run through that. I'll take any questions if you have any at this stage.
Thanks, Ian. Those examples are, I think, really helpful for anyone who's kind of seeing this for the first time and understand it's where the PCFWC comes from, and then it gives some real life examples as to what potentially is in the road ahead for us as well. So much appreciated. Appreciate your time. Thanks. So as I said, the PCFWC is a public-private partnership, and we're grateful to have the support of regional jurisdictions up and down the West Coast to help bolster the efforts of food businesses to cut waste from their operations. And one of those jurisdiction partners is here with us today. Kyle Pogue is at the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, also known as CalRecycle. They're a supporter of PCFWC, and Kyle's here to talk about the role they play. Kyle?
Thank you, James. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you putting up with a non-headshot picture there as well. I did release that fish, but I just want to tell you that it's a pleasure to be here today to represent the jurisdiction partners in the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. As James mentioned earlier, includes Oregon and Washington and many large cities within those states and within California. So it's a pleasure to be here. I can tell you that, reducing wasted food in California is a priority, and it is one of the pillars that you see reflected on this slide here to really tackle the climate change issues that we're facing and really addressing short-lived climate pollutants. And in terms of food waste, that ends up translating directly to landfill methane emissions, which are 84 times more stringent than carbon dioxide. And it is one of the largest sources of methane emissions within California, those landfill methane emissions. So getting organic materials out of landfills are a priority. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you this slide just to illustrate the scope and scale of the issue here in California. This shows out of the roughly 40 million tons of material disposed annually within California, about 6 million tons of that is food waste. And of that 6 million tons, a recent study of ours shows that about 1 million of those tons are potentially donatable for food recovery. And the reason I show this slide too is also to illustrate that we need to see a holistic approach to addressing food waste. This huge issue from prevention to rescue to recovery. And we have a new law here in California, SB 1383, that really goes after rescuing edible food for human consumption, and then also recovering that at the end for either composting, anaerobic digestion, or for other uses. Prevention is a part of this, but that's why we wanted to specifically participate in the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, is to address the source reduction or the prevention aspects needed to tackle the food waste issue. And so that's why in 2018, California, along with our other jurisdiction partners, signed on to the Pcfwc to cut food waste in half by 2030. And that's really consistent with our climate goals here in California. Next slide, please. I talked about this really as methane being a super pollutant here, and definitely a priority, and one of the top 3 sources of methane emissions in California. And that's why getting putrescible materials out of California landfills is very important. Food waste, our single largest component of the waste stream, is one of those. But we also have to get about 25 million tons of organic material out of landfills by 2025 to address this issue. Okay, next slide, please. I'll just leave this here so you guys can see my contact information in case you have additional questions. But let me go on and say that the importance of CalRecycle and the jurisdiction partners participating in this effort is really the engagement with industry and the engagement with the expertise that World Wildlife Fund, WRAP, and ReFed and associated consultants really bring to the table to couple with your expertise out there on your supply chains. And can we bring all this expertise together to really get at the prevention aspects of food waste? I think it makes not only climate sense, but it makes fiscal sense to address this. And I think this voluntary work can help really build upon that. So I think at this point, I'll turn it back to James, but it is an honor to participate in this, and we are fully supportive of this effort. Thank you.
Much appreciated, Kyle. Thanks for that. And now I'd like to open up the floor for some questions from all of you out there. Thanks to everyone who submitted one so far ahead of time. We're going to bring our panelists back up to join us. Welcome back, everyone, as you pop on screen. As I mentioned, we had a couple questions come in ahead of time from those who registered. And I think we'll start with those as the audience has some time to kind of mull over and digest everything we've been dumping on the past 35 minutes or so. For our first question, I'm going to toss this over to Natasha and Julia. We'll start with you, Natasha, first. Why did you join a regional initiative like PCFWC if you're a national company? Oh, you're muted, Natasha.
Sorry, that's a really great question. I mean, first of all, for us, about a third of our fleet operates within the Western United States, so it makes logistical sense. But I think that to answer the real question, it's really just a matter of you have to start somewhere, right? And so no other collaborative initiative exists like this anywhere else in the country right now. And so this was a good place for us to start. And with the hopes of when Justin and I first joined, we really envisioned this expanding eventually across the country. And that's really one of the reasons why we decided to join regionally. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha. Julia, why did you, as a national producer of goods, why did you guys join a regional commitment?
Yeah, for us, I mean, this issue, it touches our entire value chain from the farm to our eaters. So that's not just limited to our region, but we're headquartered here in Milwaukee, Oregon. So our manufacturing takes place here. And as a manufacturer signatory, we want to really focus on production here within our walls first and measurement there. So I'm really proud of our region for being a leader. Like Natasha said, that I'm not aware of something similar that exists in our country. Ian's work is very inspiring that we can learn from. So yeah, we're glad to be part of the Pacific Coast Collaborative.
Thanks, Julia. And you're absolutely right, to both you and Natasha's point. There is no real other initiative in the US that is data-backed action that's actually moving forward with those sort of initiatives. So appreciate you guys bringing that up. Natasha, I'm going to throw you back into the spotlight. It sounds like Sprouts is already working on food waste initiatives. Why join this effort if you're already doing other things?
As I mentioned earlier, for us, it's really about where can we take this now? Like, especially after, being with you guys for a while, we kind of see where other both large and smaller retailers are. And for us, we feel really great about where we're standing right now in terms of how we handle our food waste and diversion efforts. But there's always more to be done. There's always opportunities to improve. And I don't think that we could have made the improvements that we've already initiated as a result of participation in this collaborative. If it wasn't for working with this group of amazing individuals and learning from each other, we really wouldn't be able to kind of evolve even further to really achieve, ultimately, which is our goal, zero waste.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. This next question is for Kyle. What would you consider to be success for your participation in the PCFWC? And what are you looking for as a jurisdiction who's part of this?
Yeah, thanks for the question, James. To me, really what we're excited about seeing is some measurable success, right? Putting really some practical measures in place that are replicable and shareable with other industry partners that really helps build momentum here. Long story short is I want to see food waste not be an issue any longer within California. And if we can employ the suite of things that I mentioned before that includes this collaborative effort, I think we'll achieve some success. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. And that's a great point. Everyone's contributing towards the overall goal of reducing waste, the food waste in California, Oregon, Washington, et cetera. They themselves don't necessarily have to have a 50% goal. They can make a goal whatever they want to be, but as long as they're contributing towards the end, I think everybody's sort of winning, on the long run. So that's a great point. I'm going to bring Teresa up next. Could you give some examples of how EDF has worked with companies to address climate issues?
Yes, so one example that we've already talked about is the Climate Core Fellowship Program. And we talked a little bit about the food waste program, but this is actually a much larger program. It's been around since about 2008 and has had, I believe, over well over 1,000 graduate students now that have been placed in more than 500 organizations across US, China, and India. And these are all summer fellows, 8 to 12 weeks, designing tools and recommendations to accomplish emission reduction goals and things like energy consumption, renewable energy, electrifying fleets, and so on within those companies. So that's one example of how we work with companies, is our fellowship program. The other example that is more of what my team does, which is much more intensive partnerships with these companies. And we've been doing that type of partnership work for, like I said, about 30 years with a wide range of companies, one of them being Walmart. And when we work with companies, we bring in our sector-specific expertise, as well as science, economic, and policy experts to help companies set science-based goals, implement projects, track progress, and also deliver the results that they need against their goals. So when working with Walmart, one of the things that we realized is that just by taking some simple steps, like encouraging suppliers to make efficient use of raw materials or even just energy efficiency programs within their supply chains, could drive change on a really grand scale when working with a company like Walmart. And then in a bit more complex project, we worked with Walmart to identify key suppliers with a large amount of row crops in their supply chains. And then we worked with those suppliers to work with their farmers to advise farmers on how to more efficiently use nitrogen-based fertilizers, which emit massive greenhouse gases when used in excess, to not only reduce the emissions, but also save money and gain better crop yields. And so those are two examples of sort of a light touch with our fellowship program, but also the much more complex partnerships that we have with companies like Walmart, McDonald's, FedEx, et cetera.
Thanks, Teresa. That's really, really helpful. Much appreciated. This question's for Mark. Why join the Pcfwc as opposed to any other waste reduction initiative?
Well, I think it's really boils down to both influence and impact. I think being on the West Coast, it was natural for us to look at an organization like that was focused on the West Coast, but also, having a voice that, speaks to the regional issues and the challenges that we're facing, I think is very important. I think being able to get engaged with the regulatory, agencies, and really, I think, develop a spirit of collaboration and partnership, I think is productive, and this has provided that environment for that to occur. So I think it's been very productive from that standpoint.
Thanks, Mark. And actually, I've got another question here that's, I think, best for you, honestly. As a former government official, you've now seen both the public and private side of this. You're probably the best person to answer, like, how can you speak to the value of a public-private partnership for an initiative like Pcfwc?
Well, I think, it's been said, perfect can be the enemy of good. And I think a lot of times what happens in designing legislation to address an issue, sometimes the perfect becomes the goal, and the good is really good enough and really would, I think, accomplish a major improvement. I think kind of having the collaboration between business and the regulatory agencies, I think, allows the conversations around what is good and what is a good outcome and how can we work to that perfect outcome eventually, but get to the good first, is, I think, a really important part of the conversation. I think, just from a recycling standpoint, one of the things that I worked on was making it simple. It's like the more complicated recycling is, or food waste, addressing food waste is, the less effective the efforts are going to be, because consumers get confused. So I think those are little things that, that all add up. But I think not letting the perfect be the enemy of good, being able to collaborate effectively with the regulatory agencies and really speak as a voice for business as part of the group is, I think, has all been beneficial.
That's really helpful, Mark. That's great insight. Thanks. This next question is for Ian. Given manufacturing is already quite lean and efficient when it comes to food waste, how would participation in PCFWC benefit them? And maybe an example or two of what they could be doing.
Yeah, I think the thing that works best for us, I'm working with all the major multiple retailers here in the UK, and they're helping to leverage their influence on their supply chain. So, you know, I'm currently running 12 whole chain projects, and that's an end-to-end, you know, process. So looking at every process point from, you know, even from growing through to, you know, harvesting, et cetera, right through to the consumer impacts, which is very important that we address. The benefit is that you're stronger together, you know, as a group. Convening a group such as the one that you have, it's very similar to what we do in the UK on the Cartel Commitment. And you can't always address issues in isolation as a business. If you work together, leverage your scale, you'll achieve a lot more because you have common issues, common sustainability issues that you can't address on your own. And so by coming together, yeah, that's what we found. It works an awful lot better.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks. We've had 2 questions come in, and I'm going to sort of answer them myself at the same time. First one being, can you provide a little more information on the sprint projects that were mentioned earlier? And absolutely. Right now, we have about 6 projects in motion that range from piloting AI and helping signatories order product more accurately to demand, to diving into bakery goods, understanding how to better manage inventory and ordering at surplus at the end of the day, exploring how we can use the mass influx of e-commerce data we now have available with the increase of online ordering and more. The second question actually ties into that last project. We're understanding it's not just about how we can potentially impact the supply chain, but how can we also impact consumers at the same time? And that project is also exploring how can retailers and up the supply chain potentially influence consumers in a positive way with best practices and understanding how to use the items, the fruits and vegetables and whatnot that they're consuming better. And so and we're also understanding that we're not going to be able to do this just with business. Business has the power to impact. Business has the power to make these huge shifts in the sector to make this change happen. But at the end of the day, we still have consumers that we need to join on. So we're looking at that and really trying to understand where the general public plays a role and how we can potentially work with them as well. To go back to those projects are completely voluntary, and they're also paid for by PCFWC. We understand that with businesses at the forefront of change, we need to help provide the assistance and tools for them to be those change makers. So, you know, whether you've got huge bandwidth or short bandwidth, those projects are at the time of the day, at time of execution. If you can join and you want to participate as a business, that's awesome. Let's get you involved. If it's too much right now or doesn't quite fit your format, that's okay. You're still going to get those learnings at the end of the day. And so that's that question. And I've got another question here. If I'm already reporting elsewhere, why would I do it through PCFWC as well? And I think I'll take that question first and maybe bounce it over to one of the signatories. It's really a great question. We're making PCFWC the hub for food waste reporting. So as mentioned before, when you plug your data into the Refed Food Waste Calculator, numbers for the EPA Food Waste Challenge and the WRI Atlas are also populated. And we're also working to integrate Project Gigaton in the future. In essence, PCFWC is sort of your one-stop shop for measurement and reporting, streamlining all the major reporting entities into one house. I come from the retail sector myself, and I know that you can't manage what you don't measure. And also at the same time, you only have so much time in the day. You already have too much to do. You know, how can we as PCFWC is a question that comes down to me. You know, how can we make your life, your work easier and more streamlined when you come to the table? Because that's also part of our goal. And to really quickly, to Natasha, Mark, and Julia, really quickly, what would you say to a company that's considering joining the PCFWC, but maybe is trying to work internally with their upper management to convince them, or they're on the fence, like why is it worth joining? I'll start with you, Mark.
You know, it's a good organization that provides valuable insight and support on the sustainability journey, specifically regarding food waste. I think getting that kind of support, I think, can only improve your efforts overall. So I think from that standpoint, it was a no-brainer for us.
Thanks. And Julia?
We're more powerful together. So no matter where you are on that sustainability journey, it'll be valuable. It's time well worth spending, and it's focused on business metrics. So business forward. So that has multitude of benefits outside of just food waste.
Thanks, Julia. And finally, Natasha.
I mean, if you're pushing down to brass tacks of really why this is important is, one, there's no more powerful tool that I'm aware of that can really give you insight in terms of data collection on where you stand and how much food is being wasted within your org. Additionally, if you are in the retail sector and you're operating anywhere in California, you should be motivated to join the collaborative because of the fact that SB 1383 is coming online, and that makes food waste diversion not just we should do it for the planet, but also a regulatory compliance. And why not take advantage of a great group of people that have a number of resources that can help you along that path.
Thanks, Natasha. And thanks for all of your questions. Remember, if you still have questions we didn't answer, please email me directly after the webinar. You can find my email address in the chat box. Now I'd like to introduce Pete Pearson from Pcfwc Resource Partner WWF for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, James. So as we let everybody go today, the one thing I'll say is that, globally, what we have is a situation where countries and governments are committing to the food loss and waste agenda. We're unique here in the United States in that, we've set national ambitions, but we also have 50 states that have to influence this as well, that have to get in the game, so to speak. And so I applaud the fact that California, Oregon, and Washington have gotten in the game, right? They've made the commitment to show a measured reduction of food loss and waste. Now, what I think is interesting is when you make that commitment, it's not necessarily apparent how complex of a commitment that can be, right? To actually show that measured reduction. We know that there are a couple imperatives, and one of them is you cannot do this without support from the business community, right? So the states can set all these ambitions and they can set these goals, but it's going to go nowhere if you don't have participation from the private sector. And so again, I applaud the signatories that we have right now, because without them, nothing would be going anywhere. So what we're hopeful for is that this starts to snowball and that we get more businesses joining, and then eventually this becomes national in scope and that we start receiving data from companies and states all over the country. And so again, this I think is just the start. It's a model that we're going to make mistakes and there's things that we probably need to adjust and fix. But like has been mentioned, like you can't reduce food loss and waste unless you have measurement as a core pillar of what you're doing. And you cannot do this unless you have public and private sector involvement. And those two elements are things that I think we're doing really well. And I think it shows some promise for what the future can bring. So with that, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Pete. And thanks to all our presenters today. And thanks to all of you out there watching and for submitting questions. If you'd like to learn more about the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment and how your business can be a part of it, please email me directly, james.peronio@wwf.us.org. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a host company for EDF or Refit Climate Core Food Waste Fellowship Program, please email mkodis@edf.org. And if you're concerned about the impact of food waste in the climate, on the economy, and on food security, we encourage you to learn more at the resources on the screen. Thanks again for joining us all, and have a great day.